just gets on television and radio and says the truth, if that's so unusual, Israel and the Western way of life is in grave, grave danger.
Glenn Beck is a man of his word. He says what he believes to be true because it's important to him, even if it's painful.
We all know what the problem is, so let's fix it. Let's do something about it.
The man you see on TV and listen to on the radio is exactly the same person who comes home at the end of the day. I should know. I'm Tanya Beck, Glenn's wife. And yes, there is a chalkboard in my living room. In the spring of 2011, our lives were changing. Glenn was leaving Fox to launch his own network, and we were moving from New York to Dallas. Change can be stressful on a family, and we are no exception to that. And still, with all that was happening, I wasn't aware that in the middle of all of it, Glenn felt there was something else he had to do.
I didn't want to worry her more than she already is. I had also promised her that things would slow down.
Because of the scope of it and how much time it took, and I mean, it was almost a full year in the making, that I think everybody thought, you know, this is it. We've done the big event, and it was great, and it was successful, and, you know, people have now gone their own ways with the message and are doing their own things, and it's great.
Honestly, I really thought that this was something that we weren't going to do. I thought this was an Abrahamic moment.
You're showing the city wall.
I thought at first it was just, you know, why don't we go take a trip to Israel? And then as the conversation progressed and it was, you know, more about doing an event there, you know, I think my heart sank and I thought, oh man.
I remember thinking, I don't remember even when it happened, but I remember thinking, why would you have this conversation in front of my wife? And I think it was Joe probably that said something. And I know it's because he was thinking, because all normal people would have had this discussion with their wives.
So yeah, it wasn't a private conversation between the two of us the first go around. But there was a private conversation after that.
But we're not normal people. I mean, how far do we have to go before you realize we're not normal?
I read The Hiding Place, and I didn't know the story of Corrie ten Boom, and it was quite an eye-opening experience. She was able to get a Bible into the prison, and she was in a cell by herself, and that's what kept her going.
And I knew she knew when she finished in like a week the book The Hiding Place. That's when I knew she knows what's happening.
As a family, we agreed. We were all committed to the Restoring Courage event in Israel on August 24th. We used the time we set aside for vacation and began a very important journey.
My wife said to me on the last day, she said, any vacation that starts in Auschwitz and ends in Berlin, not a vacation. And I said, well, we're not going to end in Berlin.
Right. We didn't go to Berlin, but we did start in Poland. The first person we met in Poland was our guide, Vicki Berglis, a remarkable woman. She was born in England, but spent most of her life in New York. In 1979, Vicki and her husband moved their family to Israel. They live in the West Bank.
Very shortly after we moved, we started a settlement called Neve Eliza, which is part of Karnei Shamron, and we brought about 100 families from the States to live in the settlement. And today it's really a beautiful place to live. We also started a girls' college for students from America and England and Australia who come to study religious studies here in Israel for a year.
We found out later that initially, Vicky was not sold on being Glenn's guide.
I didn't know Glenn, and I didn't want to be I didn't want to take a showman with me. I wasn't interested. To me, Poland is something very sacred.
Before committing, Vicky decided she would seek wise counsel. She called her dad.
His name is Rabbi Fabian Schoenfeld, and he's considered one of the leading rabbis in the United States. And he said, you must do this. This man is such a friend of the Jewish people, and this is so important for all of us that he go, and I'm asking you to do this. So I did.
Our first stop was at a beautiful old synagogue, the only Jewish house of worship to survive World War II. There we met the chief rabbi of Poland, an American from New York City.
How strange is it for you now to be the chief rabbi here of Poland?
I'd say it's very strange, because Poland before the war was really the center of the heart of the Jewish world, the Ashkenazi Jewish world. And in some ways the fact that an American now is the chief rabbi reflects on the level of destruction that took place, that they had to bring somebody in from the outside.
I thought he laid a great foundation for me. That seems like 1,000,000 years ago, a different lifetime ago now. And in a 3-day period, starting with him, I understood evil and I understand good. How come there were only 6,000 people that stood up here in Poland?
You know, as we say, that questions are always better than answers. Why didn't more people stand up? I don't know if we really can answer that, but I could perhaps not fully explain it, but give some glimmers of explanation. And that if somebody comes to you and says, if you help your neighbor, I'm going to kill you, I'm going to kill your wife, I'm going to kill your children. And not only they say it, they do it. That is a pretty big disincentive. Because of that, I actually think that 6,000 is a huge number. And here I think when one begins to look at the Holocaust, at the Shoah, one is overwhelmed by the sense of inexplicable evil. And that's something that we confront. But when I meet righteous Gentiles, people who risk their lives, and some of them gave their lives to save Jews, it's what I call inexplicable good.
Michael was the beginning of the good versus evil. That's what I was really struggling with him. I was trying to find, I knew what I was about to see, I thought I was, and I didn't know how do you explain that? I know now.
It is definitely hard to explain how there could be goodness in the face of evil, and even in some of the worst places, like the ghetto.
If you'd walk into the Warsaw Ghetto, you'd see a place that was so crowded that they had Jewish policemen directing the pedestrian traffic. And it was sometimes one-way traffic, as in Karmelitska Street, because the streets were so crowded you couldn't have people walking both ways. You would see starvation. You would see typhus, you would see lice, you would see tremendous suffering. You would see children lying on the streets dying because their parents were already dead and they had no one to take care of them. You would see fear. You would see despondency, but you would also see tremendous amounts of courage.
Little children would smuggle food for their families. Young adults took over the education of the children. And a group of young people, mostly teenagers, led an uprising against the Nazis.
It took courage. It also took knowing that you had nothing to lose anymore. Because that's when you have an uprising. When your parents are dead, they said, we have no parents to worry about us anymore. And you don't have to worry about them either anymore. They're gone. They had nothing to lose, but it took a tremendous amount of courage.
There were courageous acts outside the ghetto walls. There were people, non-Jewish people, who tried to help, risk their lives to help those inside the walls. We met one of them, a camera-shy little woman, a righteous Gentile, named Paulina.
She felt that this was the right thing to do, that how could you do anything but help these starving people and but save them, because otherwise they'd be killed.
Niemcy, jak wkroczyli do tego miasta, to zaczęli mordować Żydów. Po tych zamordowanych zostały dzieci osierocone, które były już bez domów, chodziły głodne po ulicach, prosiły o jedzenie. Do nas do domu raz zapukała dziewczynka, prosiła, że jest głodna, żeby jej dać food. Mama oczywiście dała jej coś do niej i powiedziała jej, przyjdź jutro o tej porze, zgotuję dla ciebie zupę, będziesz jadł. Na drugi dzień przyszła, ale nie sama. Przyprowadziła 4 dzieci. Mama miała sporo zupy, ja jej nalewałam, jadł.
It was pure, unadulterated goodness, and that's what I find so moving about her story.
She wasn't a hero. She was normal in a world that somehow or another had completely gone insane. Our job is to just know what the standards are. I don't need to teach my kids to be heroes. I need to teach them, if you see somebody who needs soup, give it to them, even at your own peril. Give it to them. Never stop being a human being. Give it to them.
Ojciec postanowił ukryć tą rodzinę w tym bezpieczeństwie. Ojciec miał kontakt z gospodarzem rolnym na wsi, o którym wiedział, że przechowuje. Ten gospodarz miał u siebie w stodole wykopany głęboki bunkier i już w tym bunkrze było schowanych.
I think it's such a sense of good and evil. It's being able to differentiate so clearly, which is so hard for most of us today. She knew what was good, and so did her family, and what was right, and she knew what was evil. And she stood on the side of good. Very courageous family.
Paulina said the best thing ever. The righteous weren't righteous. They didn't become righteous. They just held the line as society went off the cliff.
Tam byli zupełnie bezpieczni. Ten gospodarz wszystkich żywił, karmił. Myśmy mieli kontakt z nimi. Podawało się odzież, koce, lekarstwa, witaminy. Ta rodzina w tym bunkrze przeżyła do końca wojny.
If Paulina's parents would not acted, my mother was about to be deported to a concentration camp or death camp. My father would probably be alive for another few days or a week, and of course I would be with my mother going to death. My name is Karl Shapiro. I was born in Breslau, Germany. I don't remember much about my childhood. We were expelled from Germany, and we came to live in a town called Kalush, which is a small town in southeast portion of 1939 Poland. They told all Jews must move into a ghetto. So we lived in a ghetto for a year and a half, a year and 3 months, 3 families in one house. And that's when my father said, don't look through the window, don't ask anything, just live a silent life. That's how I lived. As the ghetto was being liquidated, groups were taken away and they just disappeared. We just couldn't believe that the Germans were really killing. At that time I was 7 years old, and my childhood basically stopped at that point because my father said I cannot go outside to play, nor can I make any demands on them. Demands like, why can't I go to play? Why can't I have extra food? I'm being bored. I just have to keep silent. Finally, at the end of mid-end of 1942, I believe the SS officer hinted to my father, we all have our favorite Jew, hinted to my father that he cannot protect them much longer. After that 1 year, a Polish man brought me to live with my aunt and uncle and their 2 sons who worked in a labor camp. The labor camp consisted of the equivalent of army barracks. I joined my aunt and uncle, and my aunt says, we're going to go to work each day and you have to hide during that period. They gave me a potty, some water and bread, and he said, if you make a noise, someone will check what's happening, and all of us will be shot. So I lived this way for 3 months. I knew my life was at stake. I have no idea what I did for 12 hours a day. During that period, my parents escaped from the ghetto as it was being liquidated. My father was in that warehouse. He was protected. My mother was taken with the remaining Jews to the main marketplace to be dispensed of. She managed to dig a hole under the fence, and she hid in an outhouse up to here for 2 days. That's all I know. Somebody brought me from that labor camp to the Polish farmer, and there my real full-time hiding took place for about 1.5 years. I was hidden in that bunker for 1.5 years with my parents. My connection to Pauline is she's the daughter of Zachary and Bronislava Plaksy, her parents, who were personally instrumental in finding a way for my parents to hide, but more importantly, provide financial support to the Polish farmer who hid us for 1.5 years. If anyone came to the barn, what you saw was a haystack and some animals. But if you knew where to look for, you removed a clump of hay, and there was a tunnel through the haystack, coming more or less to the center of the haystack, and there was a trapdoor. I cannot say I felt fear, but I saw the fear on everyone's face. Any sound outside, they felt they were being discovered and burned down, not by the Germans, by the local people. So they lived in total fear. There was a child with us, a baby. When I came, I was 8.5 years old. I don't know how old the baby was. When the baby cried. The adults were very upset. The mother put clothing on the baby's face, pressed harder, till the baby died. My definition of courage is to do what your heart and mind tells you to do. Courage that Bronislav and Zachary displayed is on a higher degree than the courage of a soldier in the midst of battle. In the midst of battle, it's instinctively, you go, you fight the enemy to save your friends. You don't get a chance to think about it. But here, Zachary and Bronislava Plaksy lived in constant fear, week after week, month after month. And they could have easily decided enough. We did enough good deeds. But they lasted through. This is courage that's beyond description. Courage that I don't know if I would be able to do.
The most difficult part of our journey was still ahead of us, Auschwitz, a place where millions of Jews have a tragic connection. One of those was Johnny Daniels, an advisor to the Deputy Speaker of the Knesset, Israel's legislative branch of government.
So I was born and raised in London, England, in a northern suburb called Finchley. I came to Israel at the age of 18.
The reason why I feel it's the right time now, more than any other opportunity in the past, is more to do with you. And it's to do with the fact that I'm coming with such an important person for me, and an important person for the people of Israel and the state of Israel.
So I came here, I went to a yeshiva, to a Jewish college for a bit less than a year. I left there after a year and I joined the Israeli army. The piece of paper that I took with me to Auschwitz was given to me by my mother-in-law. That piece of paper had written on it all the names of my wife's family that were murdered in Auschwitz and Birkenau.
The Nazis, in a sense, succeeded, or tried to succeed in wiping out every bit of Jewish memory there was.
Tanya was very nervous. You'd see it in her faces, those pictures that George took. Though I've never seen her look so tired. I've never seen her look so sad.
Ugh, awful. I walked through the gate onto the grounds, and the feeling of grief is very strong. And it's just heart-wrenching when and there's no way to realize what these people went through, but to walk there and feel what's left there, it's really overwhelming.
So for all of them, it was their first time in Auschwitz. And I always feel when I take people for their first time, and I certainly felt it with them, it's a loss of innocence. It's a loss of trust in the world, and I felt I'm leading them to such a bad place.
I was walking through the gates of Auschwitz. The big sign, "Work will set you free." I was walking arm in arm with Glenn, and Glenn turned around to me. He was choked up, so was I, and he said to me, "Johnny, your grandparents, your wife's grandparents, they'd be so proud."
So Mengele was a doctor who was sworn, of course, by the Hippocratic Oath to save lives. And he meets every train at the station, almost every train, and he's wearing white gloves, and he carries a cane with a hook at the end, and he loved opera. He would sing operatic arias as he's doing the selections, and very often there'd be a band playing there. There was a young Jewish woman called Alma Rose, who was a very famous musician, and he would have her and her orchestra play music while the trains were arriving. And he would do his selection just to the right, to the left, to the right, to the left. He was playing God, who would live and who would die. And he would tear families apart. They couldn't even say goodbye to each other.
One of the first buildings we went, there was this big picture of the Hungarians coming in. And they were all grandmothers and little children.
The mothers had given their children to the grandmothers to protect them. And that was, I could easily put myself, having two young children, in that place where you'd do anything, doesn't matter what it was, anything to protect your children. And that was really tough to be there and to see, you know, the looks on the faces of the children and the grandmothers just holding their hands, you know, so strongly, just not wanting to let them go.
When they had that room where they showed all the different artifacts that were taken from the Jews as they entered, they showed the briefcases, the shoes, the glasses, spectacles. You could look at that and there was a certain distance between what was there and what I know.
I walked up to that table. It was sitting off kind of by itself and it was lit. And I was afraid of seeing what was in that. And I walk up to it and I saw just, might have been something knit or something, I don't remember what it was, but I caught a glimpse of it and I knew it was children's stuff.
But when I walked over to this small little counter, and inside there was one thing. A doll. A kid's doll. With a completely smashed face. It hit me harder than anything. Because I, 2 days before that, celebrated my little girl's birthday. She's 2 years old. And that celebration of my little girl's birthday, I bought her a doll. What affected me more than anything was in Auschwitz, in the gas chamber. I walked in and straight out. I could not go in there.
I didn't realize it took 20 minutes to kill them.
I don't usually get affected by things, because at the end of the day, they're just things.
The horror of 20 minutes. But the unbelievable spirit of man, again, lifting the babies to the ceiling. The children were always found on top of the bodies because they'd lift the children up, thinking that there would be better air and they could survive.
That room, the horror. What happened there was too much for me to take. I was in there for maybe a split second, literally in and out. I just felt wrong.
I hung on to Johnny at one point in the day or the next day. And all I could think of was, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I had nothing to do with it, but I'm sorry. I will always remember that part of the day from that picture of my wife and I, with my head down on her shoulder. She is my strength. I mean, that is the quintessential Glenn and Tanya picture. I am relying on her strength, and she was a shield of what was coming. We were about to walk to Birkenau. And as I approached, we didn't talk, which was good. I had so much I wanted to say, so much I wanted to point out. And it was good to be silent because it just churned.
Turning down the road and seeing what was at the other end was shocking, never having had seen it. We were in a dark place. You could feel it. It was a place where evil lived, even thrived. But it was important that at the site where perhaps man's greatest injustice struck the Jewish people, that we joined Johnny in honoring his family.
I pledge, but do not fail, to supply all for the light, for the spiritual exaltation of the righteous.
To light that candle in memory of all those I'd lost. To say that prayer. To exalt the souls of those who were killed there was a profound experience.
I find it remarkable that we Jews have the ability to mourn people whom we've never met, and to mourn events that happened not in our lives, not even in our ancestors' lives, but way before that. We have this ability to mourn for our people, whoever they are, and to feel their pain. And that's what I was thinking about Johnny. He never met the people whom he was mourning for. They were his wife's grandparents. And yet, he had the ability to mourn for them and to feel their loss. I think that's a great thing.
I was thinking to myself, how, Lord? How do we stop it? How do we stop it again?
To each of them, I will give a name.
This journey wasn't just about the Holocaust. This was a search for courage in the face of evil.
To each man.
To every woman. To every child.
You cannot inspire unless you do it yourself. You got to go out there and you got to say it. And you have to say it in a way that others can understand it. And when one decides to go on this path of tikkun olam, of fixing the world, you have to know we're in it for the long haul. This is not a short-term investment.
To those who fought.
That's Mala Zimmerdown. Mala was being taken to the gallows when she did two things. She slapped the SS man escorting her in his face, which took a tremendous amount of courage. And she had a razor with her, and she slit her wrists so that she would die of her own hand rather than die at the hands of the SS, rather than give them that satisfaction.
To those who went hungry, so their children could eat.
When you see evil, you must physically fight it. Not try to explain it away, not to rationalize. It's true evil that if you don't fight it, you basically are cooperating with the evil against the goodness that exists.
It's so important to me when I feel overwhelmed by inexplicable evil, then I read the stories of the righteous Gentiles and I say, it doesn't take away inexplicable evil, but it gives me the ability to try to do something good, because I call the righteous Gentiles inexplicable good, because I couldn't do what they did. I'm pretty sure I couldn't. And they are the kindest, sweetest, normal people.
To those who displayed strength of the human spirit.
I can just think of Rosa Rabota, who was 23 years old, and her friends who withstood that torture for a month and didn't give any information to the SS. And their friends in turn were saved because they didn't give out that information.
Those words, if you're there, you wonder, which one am I? Will I sing and give inspiration? Will I cry out and scream in terror so someone else has to comfort me? Will I fight? Will I give up on my God? Will I grow in faith?
to the strong and the weak, and to those like you and me who were merely just human. You know, at first I didn't really understand, you know, what it was all about, but I get it now.
We would have had the state of Israel even had there been no Holocaust. The Zionist movement started and was flourishing way before. Our right to Israel begins in the Bible.
The state of Israel is the third Jewish commonwealth. That is our original homeland.
We as Jews have been persecuted against, run after, massacres, slaughters for the last 2,500 years. We have not had a minute's silence. People forget that only 70 years ago we were being chased with a swastika.
We came out of the Holocaust feeling we're not going to live like this anymore. We're not going to live as second-rate citizens, or as Jan Blonsky put it, we're not going to live in the basements of other nations. We need our own home. And that's what this is for us. It's our home. Good, bad, difficult, easy. It's home. It's our roots.
I have nowhere else to call home. Europe, that's definitely not home. America might have a homely feeling to it now, but who knows how history is going to play itself. Whilst we have a place to call our own, we have to stand here, stand strong, and be able to fend for ourselves.
I don't have a choice because I made a promise. I would be a better person than I was allowing myself to be. That I would stand when asked to stand. I don't want my children to wonder at all, where was my dad? What did he think? Where was he?
I'll tell you where he was. He was in Israel on 8/24.